Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd be writing about property disputes and legal battles, but here I am. My name's Sarah, and this is the story of how my entitled neighbor Linda tried to claim my garden as her own, leading to a wild ride through the legal system. Buckle up, because this tale has more twists and turns than my prized rose bushes. My husband Mike and I bought our dream home in a quiet suburban neighborhood 5 years ago. The previous owners had cultivated a beautiful garden in the spacious backyard, complete with raised vegetable beds, fruit trees, and a stunning array of flowers. As an avid gardener myself, I was thrilled to continue nurturing this little slice of paradise. For the first few years, everything was perfect. I spent countless hours tending to the plants, expanding the garden, and even adding a small greenhouse. My neighbors seemed to appreciate the beauty it added to the area, often complimenting me on the vibrant colors and delicious produce. Well, all except for Linda. Linda moved in next door about 2 years after we did. From day one, she was difficult. You know the type, always finding something to complain about, whether it was the color of our mailbox or the fact that our sprinklers occasionally misted her driveway. But I tried to be a good neighbor, always greeting her politely and even offering her some of our homegrown vegetables. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Linda would often stand at the fence between our properties, eyeing my garden with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. She'd make offhand comments like, I've always wanted a garden like this, or, it's a shame the previous owners didn't extend this to my side of the property line. I brushed off these remarks, assuming she was just envious or making awkward attempts at conversation. Oh, how naive I was. The real trouble started last spring. I was out in the garden early one Saturday morning, pruning my rose bushes, when I heard the distinct sound of a shovel hitting dirt. Curious, I peeked around the corner of my greenhouse to see Linda, of all people, digging up one of my prized hydrangea bushes. "Linda," I exclaimed, rushing over. "What on earth are you doing?" She looked up at me, completely unperturbed, as if digging up someone else's plants was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, good morning, Sarah," she said casually. "I'm just moving this hydrangea to a better spot. It'll get more sun over in my yard." I stood there, mouth agape, trying to process what was happening. "Linda," I said slowly, "this is my garden. You can't just dig up my plants and move them to your yard." Linda straightened up, leaning on her shovel with an air of authority that made my blood boil. "Actually, Sarah, I think you'll find that this is my property. The garden extends well past the property line. I've been doing some research, and it turns out the previous owners encroached on what should be my land." I felt like I was in some sort of bizarre dream. "That's ridiculous," I sputtered. "We had a survey done when we bought the house. This is definitely our property." Linda just smiled that condescending smile of hers. "Well, I guess we'll just have to see about that, won't we? In the meantime, I'll be taking care of this section of the garden. It could use some improvements." With that, she went back to digging up my hydrangea. I was so shocked that I just stood there for a moment, watching her destroy years of careful cultivation. Finally, I snapped out of it. "Stop right now," I said firmly. "This is my property, and you have no right to be here. Please leave immediately or I'll have to call the police." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Go ahead," she sneered. "Call them. We'll see who they believe, the longtime resident who knows the true property lines, or the newcomer who's been taking advantage of a mistake." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, who assured me they'd send an officer right away. As we waited, Linda continued to dig, ignoring my pleas to stop. Officer Johnson arrived about 15 minutes later. He was a kind-faced man in his 40s who looked like he'd seen his fair share of neighborhood disputes. After listening to both sides of the story, he sighed heavily. "Ladies," he said, "this is clearly a civil matter. Without official documentation of the property lines, I can't determine who's right or wrong here. My suggestion would be to get a professional survey done and resolve this through proper legal channels." I nodded, relieved that at least Linda would have to stop digging up my garden for now. But when I turned to her, the smug look on her face made my stomach drop. "Oh, I intend to," she said sweetly. "In fact, I've already contacted a surveyor. They'll be out here next week to prove once and for all that this garden is rightfully mine." As Linda sauntered back to her house, shovel in hand, I felt a mix of anger and anxiety wash over me. I knew she was wrong. We'd had a survey done when we bought the house, after all. But her confidence was unsettling. What if there was some mistake in our paperwork? What if she really did have a claim to part of our land? I spent the rest of the day in a daze, recounting the bizarre confrontation to Mike and trying to figure out our next steps. We dug out our property documents, confirming that yes, The garden was indeed within our property lines. But Linda's words kept echoing in my head. The previous owners encroached on what should be my land. That night, I barely slept. Images of Linda tearing up my beloved garden haunted my dreams. By morning, I knew we needed professional help. This wasn't just about plants anymore. It was about protecting our home and our rights. First thing Monday morning, I called our real estate lawyer, Jessica Torres. I'd met her briefly during our home buying process and remembered her as a sharp, no-nonsense woman who knew her stuff. As I explained the situation, I could almost hear her rolling her eyes at Linda's audacity. "Don't worry, Sarah," Jessica reassured me. "This kind of thing happens more often than you'd think. Entitled neighbors get it into their heads that they can claim land that isn't theirs. But if you've got a proper survey and clear property lines, we'll shut this down quickly." Her confidence was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had something up her sleeve. "She seems so sure of herself," I said. "What if there's some loophole or old law she's found?" Jessica chuckled. "Trust me, I've heard it all. People try to claim adverse possession, easements, all sorts of things. But if your property records are in order, and you've been maintaining the land, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. Let's set up a meeting and go over all your documentation, just to be safe." We scheduled a meeting for the following day. In the meantime, Jessica advised me to document everything, take photos of the garden, write down any interactions with Linda, and gather all our property-related paperwork. That afternoon, I was out in the garden taking pictures when I heard Linda's voice over the fence. "Getting some last snapshots before you have to give it up?" she called out mockingly. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "Just documenting my property, Linda. I'd advise you to stay off it until this is resolved." She laughed, a sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, Sarah, you really don't know what you're up against, do you? I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I know things about this property that you couldn't possibly understand. But don't worry, I'll take good care of the garden once it's mine. Maybe I'll even let you visit it sometimes." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her delusions. Instead, I simply said, "We'll let the professionals handle this, Linda," and went back inside. The next day, Mike and I met with Jessica at her office. We spread out all our documents on her large mahogany desk: the deed, the property survey, tax records, everything we could think of that proved our ownership. Jessica pored over the papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. After what felt like hours, she looked up with a smile. "Everything here is in perfect order," she said. "Your property lines are clearly defined, and there's no question that the garden falls within your land." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. "So why is Linda so convinced she has a claim?" I asked. Jessica leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen thoughtfully against her desk. "There could be a few reasons," she mused. "She might be genuinely mistaken about the property lines. Or, more likely given what you've told me about her behavior, she's trying to intimidate you into giving up part of your land." Mike spoke up for the first time. "Can she do that? Just bully us into giving her our property?" "Not legally, no," Jessica assured us. "But some people think if they're pushy enough, others will give in just to avoid conflict. That's why it's crucial we respond firmly and decisively." She outlined a plan of action. First, we'd send Linda a formal cease and desist letter, demanding she stop trespassing on our property and making false claims. If that didn't work, we'd file for a temporary restraining order to keep her off our land until the dispute was resolved. And if she persisted, we'd take her to court. "But what about her surveyor?" I asked, remembering Linda's threat. "What if they find something we've missed?" Jessica smiled confidently. "Let them come. We'll have our own surveyor present to verify the results. And if by some miracle they do find a discrepancy, we'll deal with it legally and fairly. But based on these documents, I highly doubt that will happen." As we left Jessica's office, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that our ownership was clear, anger at Linda's audacity, and anxiety about the confrontation to come. But mostly, I felt determined. This was our home, our garden, and I wasn't about to let some entitled neighbor take it away from us. The next few days were tense. Linda's surveyor came, accompanied by Linda herself, who stood at the edge of the garden smirking as the professionals did their work. True to her word, Jessica had arranged for our own surveyor to be present, along with a neutral third party to oversee the process. I watched nervously from our kitchen window, resisting the urge to go out and hover. Mike kept reassuring me that everything would be fine, but I couldn't help imagining worst-case scenarios. What if there had been some massive mistake? What if we lost our beloved garden? After what felt like an eternity, the surveyors finished their work. I saw them conferring, pointing at maps and gesturing at various points in the yard. Linda was hovering nearby, her expression growing increasingly sour. Finally, they approached her, and even from a distance, I could see her face turn red as they spoke. A few minutes later, there was a knock at our door. It was our surveyor, looking slightly amused. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "I thought you'd like to know the results right away. The survey confirms that your property lines are exactly as documented in your deed. The entire garden is within your property." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Thank you," I said, feeling lightheaded with relief. "And Linda's claims?" The surveyor shook his head. "Completely unfounded. It seems she was basing her argument on an outdated property map from before the subdivision was redrawn 20 years ago. Her surveyor is explaining the situation to her now, but..." He trailed off, glancing over his shoulder. I followed his gaze to see Linda storming across her lawn, slamming her front door behind her. "I see," I said. "Well, thank you again for your thoroughness." As the surveyor left, Mike pulled me into a hug. "See? I told you there was nothing to worry about," he said, kissing the top of my head. I relaxed into his embrace, feeling the tension of the past few days start to dissipate. I know. I just couldn't bear the thought of losing the garden. It's not just plants. It's part of our home, Mike finished for me. "I get it, but it's ours, fair and square. Linda will just have to deal with it." But of course, Linda wasn't about to give up that easily. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of angry shouting. I rushed to the window to see Linda in our garden again, this time with a tape measure, yelling at Mike, who had apparently caught her in the act. "This is my land," she was screaming, her face beet red. "I don't care what your fancy surveyors say. My family has lived here for generations, and I know the real property lines." Mike, bless him, was keeping his cool. "Linda," he said calmly, "we've been through this. The survey yesterday proved that this is our property. You need to leave now." "I will not," Linda shrieked, stomping her foot like a toddler throwing a tantrum. "This garden belongs to me, and I'm not leaving until you admit it." That was it. I'd had enough of Linda's delusions and entitlement. I stormed outside, phone in hand. "Linda," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "this is your final warning. Leave our property now, or I'm calling the police and our lawyer." Linda turned her rage on me. "You," she spat, "you think you can just move in here and steal my land? I'll sue you for everything you've got." "Go ahead," I retorted, hitting the speed dial for Jessica's number. "I'm sure the judge will be very interested to hear how you're trespassing and harassing us despite clear legal proof that this is our property." As I raised the phone to my ear, Linda's eyes widened. For a moment, I thought she might actually attack me, but then, with a final wordless shriek of frustration, she turned and stomped back to her own yard. I let out a shaky breath, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Mike put his arm around me, guiding me back inside. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, leaning into him. "Yeah, I can't believe she's still pushing this. What is wrong with her?" Mike shook his head. "I don't know, hon, but we need to put a stop to this before it gets even more out of hand." I looked down at my phone, Jessica's number still on the screen. "You're right," I said, hitting the call button. "Time to bring in the big guns." Jessica listened intently as I recounted the morning's events. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Well," she said, "it sounds like Ms. Linda needs a reality check. Don't worry, we'll take care of this." True to her word, Jessica sprang into action. By that afternoon, Linda had been served with a formal cease and desist letter, warning her that any further trespassing or harassment would result in legal action. We also filed for a temporary restraining order, which was granted given Linda's increasingly erratic behavior. For a few days, things were blissfully quiet. Linda stayed in her house, glaring at us through her windows but not daring to set foot in our yard. I started to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. But then, about a week after the surveyor incident, I came home from grocery shopping to find absolute chaos in our front yard. Linda was there, along with two burly men I'd never seen before, and they were digging up our lawn. I slammed on the brakes, jumping out of the car before it had fully stopped. "What the hell is going on here?" I yelled, storming towards them. Linda turned to me with a triumphant grin. "Ah, Sarah. Just in time to see justice being served. These gentlemen are here to help me reclaim my rightful property." I gaped at her, unable to believe what I was seeing. "Linda, are you insane? We have a restraining order against you. You can't be here, and you certainly can't be digging up our yard." One of the men straightened up, looking uncomfortable. Ma'am," he said to Linda, "you told us this was your property and you had permission to do this work." "It is my property," Linda insisted, her voice rising hysterically. "These people stole it from me, but I'm taking it back." I pulled out my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. "I'm calling the police," I announced, And Linda, you'd better pray they get here before I lose my temper and do something I'll regret. As I spoke to the dispatcher, explaining the situation, I saw the two men exchanging worried glances. One of them quietly said something to Linda, who responded with a stream of angry words I couldn't quite make out. By the time I hung up, the men were packing up their tools. "Sorry for the trouble, ma'am," one of them said to me as they hurried past. "We were misled about the situation." Linda watched them go, her face a mask of fury. Then she rounded on me. "You think you've won?" she snarled. "This isn't over. I'll prove this is my land if it's the last thing I do." Before I could respond, the welcome sound of police sirens filled the air. 2 squad cars pulled up, and I recognized Officer Johnson stepping out of one of them. "Mrs. Parker," he said, looking from me to Linda with a weary expression, "I thought we'd settle this property dispute." I quickly explained what had happened, showing him the cease and desist letter and the restraining order. As I spoke, I could see Linda's face growing paler. Officer Johnson turned to her, his expression stern. "Ms. Linda, you're in violation of a restraining order. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." But, Linda sputtered, looking around wildly as if searching for an escape route. "This is my property. You can't arrest me on my own land." "Ma'am," Officer Johnson said firmly, "we've been over this. The property surveys and legal documents clearly show that this is not your land. Now, are you going to come quietly, or do we need to do this the hard way?" For a moment, I thought Linda might actually try to run, but then her shoulders slumped, and all the fight seemed to go out of her. As the officers led her to the squad car, she shot me one last venomous glare. "This isn't over," she hissed. I watched as they drove away, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. Was it really over? Somehow, I doubted it. My suspicions were confirmed the very next day when we received notice that Linda had filed a lawsuit against us, claiming adverse possession of our garden. Apparently, she was arguing that because she had maintained the garden, by which she meant trespassing and attempting to dig up our plants, she now had a legal claim to it. Is she for real? I asked Jessica incredulously when I called to inform her of this latest development. Can she actually do this? Jessica sighed heavily. "She can try," she said. "But don't worry. Her claim is baseless. Adverse possession requires open and notorious possession for a statutory period, which is typically many years. Linda's few attempts at trespassing don't even come close to meeting the criteria." "So what do we do now?" I asked, feeling exhausted by the whole ordeal. "Now," Jessica said, a note of determination in her voice, "we countersue. We're going to file a lawsuit for harassment, trespassing, and malicious prosecution. Linda needs to learn that her actions have consequences." And so began our journey through the legal system. Over the next few months, we found ourselves drowning in paperwork, depositions, and court appearances. Linda, it turned out, had hired a lawyer almost as delusional as she was, who threw every argument he could think of at the wall, hoping something would stick. They claimed there had been a verbal agreement with the previous owners about the property lines. They argued that the recent survey was flawed. They even tried to suggest that because Linda could see the garden from her window, she had some sort of visual easement right to it. Through it all, Jessica was our rock. She calmly and methodically dismantled each of their arguments, presenting clear evidence of our ownership and Linda's harassment. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Mike and I sat in the courtroom, watching as Linda smugly took her seat across the aisle. Her lawyer looked nervous, constantly shuffling papers and whispering to her. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the court to order. "Before we begin," she said, peering over her glasses at Linda and her lawyer, "I want to make it clear that I've reviewed all the submitted evidence thoroughly. I have to say, I'm quite perplexed by the plaintiff's claims in this case." Linda's lawyer stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we believe we can demonstrate that my client has a legitimate claim to the property in question based on historical." The judge held up her hand, cutting him off. "Counselor, let me stop you right there. Your client's claim of adverse possession is, quite frankly, absurd. The defendants have clear title to the property, confirmed by multiple surveys. Your client's sporadic trespassing does not constitute possession, let alone for the required statutory period." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the judge continued. "Furthermore, the evidence of harassment and violation of a restraining order is overwhelming. Ms. Linda," she said, turning her stern gaze to her neighbor, "your behavior in this matter has been reprehensible." Linda stood up, her face red. "But Your Honor, that garden should be mine. My family." "Sit down, Ms. Linda," the judge said sharply. "You've had your chance to present your case, and it holds no water. Now, here's what's going to happen." She proceeded to not only dismiss Linda's case with prejudice but also rule in favor of our countersuit. Linda was ordered to pay all our legal fees, plus damages for the harassment we'd endured. The judge also issued a permanent injunction barring Linda from entering our property or contacting us in any way. As the judge's gavel fell, finalizing the decision, I felt tears of relief spring to my eyes. Mike squeezed my hand, and Jessica turned to us with a triumphant smile. "Congratulations," she said softly. "It's over." We left the courtroom to find Linda being consoled by her shell-shocked lawyer. As we passed, she looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and defeat. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but she just shook her head and looked away. The drive home was quiet, both Mike and I lost in our thoughts. As we pulled into our driveway, I looked out at our garden, the cause of so much strife over the past months. Despite everything, it was still beautiful, the flowers in full bloom, the vegetables ripening on the vine. "You know," Mike said, following my gaze, "after all this, I half expected to come home and find the garden had withered away in protest." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Not a chance. This garden is tougher than Linda ever was." We spent the rest of the day in the garden, weeding, pruning, and simply enjoying the peace. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the flowers, I felt a deep sense of contentment settle over me. "I think," I said to Mike as we sat on the patio, admiring our handiwork, "we should have a garden party. Invite all the neighbors who supported us through this mess. Show them that Linda didn't win, that she couldn't destroy this beautiful space." Mike grinned, raising his lemonade in a toast. "I think that's a fantastic idea. To our garden, and to putting entitled neighbors in their place." I clinked my glass against his, laughing. "To our garden, and to justice served with a side of petunias." As we sat there, planning our victory celebration, I couldn't help but glance over at Linda's house. The curtains were drawn, and there was no sign of life. Part of me felt a twinge of pity. How lonely and bitter must someone be to go to such lengths over a garden that was never theirs? But then I remembered all the stress and pain she'd put us through, and the pity evaporated. Our garden party, held a few weeks later, was a roaring success. Neighbors from all over the block came, many bringing dishes to share or plants to add to our collection. There was laughter, music, and a palpable sense of community. As I looked around at all the smiling faces, I realized that in a weird way, Linda had done us a favor. Her ridiculous claims had brought us closer to our other neighbors, turning casual acquaintances into true friends, and it had reaffirmed our love for our home and our determination to protect it. Linda, true to the judge's orders, stayed away. We occasionally saw her peeking out from behind her curtains, but she never set foot in our yard again. Eventually, a for sale sign appeared in front of her house, and a month later, she was gone. Our new neighbors, a young couple with a toddler, were delightful. They admired the garden and asked for tips on starting their own, and when I offered them some of our homegrown tomatoes, they accepted with genuine gratitude. As for Mike and I, we threw ourselves into the garden with renewed vigor. We expanded the vegetable beds, added a small koi pond, and even built a charming gazebo where the property line used to be, a small act of defiance that never failed to make us smile. Years have passed since the Great Garden debacle, as we jokingly call it now. Our garden has flourished, becoming a neighborhood landmark of sorts. People often stop to admire the flowers or chat with us as we work. Sometimes, when I'm out there on a quiet morning, tending to my plants, I think about Linda and the chaos she brought into our lives. And then I look at the thriving, beautiful space around me, and I smile. Because in the end, we didn't just keep our garden, we made it stronger, more vibrant, and more meaningful than ever before. So if you ever find yourself dealing with an entitled neighbor who thinks they can claim what's rightfully yours, remember our story. Stand your ground, know your rights, and don't be afraid to fight for what's important to you. Because sometimes, the most beautiful gardens grow from the seeds of adversity. The next one is an entitled people story. We've been married for 4 years, together for 7. We have 2 kids, daughter 4F, and son 2M. I'm really not sure where to start. My husband is an overgrown child. He just doesn't know when it's time to be serious. This is the only problem in our marriage. He's extremely loving, affectionate, and kind. He loves being a dad. He loves our children more than anything and they love him as well. He is constantly playing with them, and I think this is where issues start to arise. My husband cannot understand when it's time to put playtime on pause. I'm serious when I say he's in playtime mode with our children from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. This results in extremely hyperactive children in the morning when I'm trying to get our daughter ready for kindergarten, and it's extremely frustrating to have to struggle to get her fed/cleaned/dressed and out the door on time for school, where he then will drive her to. At night, This results in hyperactive children who can take up to 2 hours to get to settle down and go to bed, and by then it's way past their bedtime and will sometimes wake up grumpy in the morning because they didn't get enough sleep. He will sometimes even be egging our children on at night when we're sitting with them in bed trying to wind them down to sleep. It's incredibly infuriating, and I will tell him to stop because I'm clearly trying to get them to sleep and all he's doing is keeping them up. He laughs and says he's just having fun. Husband doesn't do hard discipline. He tells our kids to stop fighting each other or to stop touching fragile objects, but when it comes to timeouts or taking away things like dessert, certain toys, TV time for the day, he all but refuses. He will leave me to be the bad guy and I'm absolutely sick of it. I'm tired of feeling like I'm the mean mom who doesn't like fun or has to ruin their fun, but he just won't do it. I've told him that he needs to stop leaving all the hard discipline up to me. Says he will, but then leaves it all up to me again next time. I dread when the kids are older and things like grounding become a thing. My husband is constantly breaking our children's toys because he wants to play with them. He's broken a little kid trampoline we got for them because he wanted to jump and play on it with them. He's broken two, our daughter and sons, of those toddler-sized motorized cars by sitting on them and riding around with them. Like, I would look out the window and see him riding around on these things having the time of his life. Meanwhile our kids are standing on the edge of the yard watching him and waiting for their turn. He's broken a little kid basketball hoop by pretending to be on a pro basketball team and doing dunks, which bend and break the actual hoop. Our daughter's birthday was last month, and one of our friends bought her a little scooter. My husband broke it within a week because he wouldn't stop playing and doing tricks on it every time he stepped outside the house for something. Our daughter was devastated because she loved that thing. Even more so because she loves our friend who gave it to her, so to her it was extra special. I also feel terrible that this toy my friend spent her money in was destroyed by my husband before my daughter barely got any playtime on it. Now, my husband is 6 foot and about 20 pounds overweight. He has absolutely no business playing on these children's toys, and I've told him time and time again to stop playing on them because they aren't made for a person his size, and that he will break them. And then he does. And he'll sheepishly carry the broken toy in to me and say sorry, but then he's back at it again destroying another toy shortly after. We got our daughter a bike for Christmas so she can start learning, and I don't even want to give it to her because I know he'll ruin it for her like he always does with their toys. These are just some of the bigger broken toy examples. There are also countless smaller things of theirs he's broken, like balls, dolls, little cars, a dollhouse, a slide, He's always making our kids play with him, even when they clearly don't want to or just want to chill out / relax and sit and watch a movie. This mostly applies to our son, who is much more introverted / sensitive than our daughter and usually prefers calm and quiet interaction over the loud and hyperactive playtime my husband always does. A handful of times he has frustrated / overwhelmed our son by continuously pushing son to play with him, resulting in son to start to cry because he just wants to be left alone. Now finally on to what prompted me to post here. My husband is always telling our kids, and everyone else that our kids are his best friends. Since our daughter started learning to talk, he's trained her to answer the question, who's your best friend? With Daddy, our son is in early talking stages and he is starting to train him do this as well. At first I didn't see any issues with this, and actually thought it was cute. But our daughter has made a really good friend 5F. I'll call her Emily, at school this year. Daughter is always talking about Emily and asking if Emily can come over / daughter can go to Emily's house. Today my husband asked our daughter, who's your best friend? And our daughter paused for a moment, got a huge grin on her face and said, Emily. And it looked like my husband had just been given the worst news of his entire life. He asked her what, and our daughter started giggling and said, Emily, again, and my husband said, no, who's your best friend? And again, still giggling, she says, Emily. My husband's face went blank and immediately removed himself from her and went into the other room. Our daughter seemed a little confused, but mostly undisturbed and went back to watching cartoons. I followed him and asked him what was wrong, and when he starts talking I realize he's beginning to cry. He tells me that he's supposed to be our daughter's best friend and that he can't believe she would toss him aside like that. Now, up until now, like I said, I thought this best friend thing was cute. I never realized exactly how serious my husband took this. If I had, I would have tried to put a stop to it early on. But then again, how exactly can you tell your husband to stop calling his kids his best friends? Anyway, I was a bit shocked at this point, and I admit I didn't use as much tact in my response as I probably could have, and ask him if he's serious. He says of course I am, and I tell him that he's the parent. He's not supposed to be a best friend to his kids. He's supposed to be the parent, and that he's 29 years older than our daughter. Of course she's going to eventually make friends her own age and start considering them her best friends. He tells me I don't understand, and I told him he was being ridiculous and childish. He looks at me as if I just slapped him and tells me I'm being heartless and accuses me of not wanting him to have a good relationship with our kids and leaves the house early to go to work. I have no idea what to do. I almost feel ridiculous, because how can someone have an issue with their husband loving their kids? I feel insane, and I haven't been able to talk to any friends about this because I feel like they'll all be so "you're mad at your husband for playing with your kids? What's wrong with you?" But I just don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to address these issues with my husband in a way he'll understand, so he'll start being reasonable about them. I also feel extremely anxious about everything now, because my husband and I have been trying for the last 2 months to conceive another baby, and now I don't want to bring another child into the world without having this mess sorted out. But I know telling my husband I want to wait on this third child will devastate him. Update. A few things first. I just want to thank everyone who commented on my OP. I got overwhelmed with the amount of responses while on mobile, had no computer when I posted, and stopped replying, but I read every single comment and story. I've received a few PMs asking for an update, and I'm sorry it's so late. This update would be extremely long if I typed every single detail, and still is kinda long, whoops, so I'm gonna try and condense it. So, I sat my husband down the night he got home from work after posting my OP and we had a long talk. Again, this would be incredibly long if I wrote all the details, so I'm gonna summarize and go in the order of my points I made in my OP. Keep in mind, our talk didn't follow the order of my post, so I'm sorry if anything seems confusing, since it would have been discussed out of order. On not knowing when to pause playtime, I told him that I know he loves playing with the kids, and I love that he loves playing with the kids, but that I really need him to work with me during bedtime. I also once again pointed out that their lack of sleep is making them grumpy and harder to manage in the mornings, and that they're growing and need their sleep. He's had a couple slip-ups since, but he's cooled it down around bedtime now and makes more of an effort to help me with bedtime. He started reading to them instead. I used to it, and is 20 times better than me at it because they love the funny voices he gives the characters. On discipline, I told him it's not fair of him to constantly make me feel like the bad guy, and that no parent likes disciplining their kids, but they need it to learn and grow into good adults, and that I need him to be united with me on punishments. He's having a little trouble with this one, but has been trying more, which I appreciate. On breaking their toys, I, again, told him that I know he loves playing with our kids, but he needs to stop destroying their things. That not only is it upsetting them, but it's causing us to needlessly spending extra money to replace things that we don't need to be. I took this part of the talk to suggest we finally get a full-size trampoline like we had been talking about for a little while, and that he should dig out his bike from the garage so he can ride with our daughter when she learns. We're both probably more excited about the trampoline than the kids, lol. We talked more about this topic, but these are the most relevant points. He realized he goes a little too far after I described the scene I wrote about in my OP, with him riding around on their little cars while the kids are standing on the sidelines. I'm also happy to report he has stayed off our daughter's new bike. On making the kids play when they don't want to, he agreed that it wasn't cool of him to push just because he wants to play. I told him our kids are people, and just because they're kids, doesn't mean they don't deserve to have their boundaries respected or time to themselves. And now on to the best friend thing. This was the first thing we discussed. Long story short, he was feeling hurt and generally having a little trouble accepting our daughter was growing up. This is really the first big thing she's done or said to show that she is, in fact, growing up. And he just wasn't expecting it and handling it very poorly, which he knew he did. I took a line from a comment on my OP and told him our children will have lots of best friends in their lifetime, but he will always be their only dad. This visibly comforted him, so thank you to whoever it was who wrote that. I took a suggestion from someone on the OP, and suggested that he call up his own parents and ask them for advice on how they handled watching 4 kids grow up and leave the nest. He really liked this idea and has since done so. I also showed him stories commenters on my OP shared about their relationship with their parents growing up. I told him that I'm not showing him them because I think he's going to become like those parents, but that I think it's important he see the children's side of things. These stories hit him pretty hard, which led into this. So, I left something out of my OP that I didn't realize was relevant. Lots of people asked how my husband's relationship with his parents was growing up, and I answered that it was great. However, my own relationship with my parents was horrible. Long story short, I don't get along with nor even like my parents, and I see/talk to them maybe once a year. Growing up was miserable, to say the least. And it affected me for quite a long time where I was a huge ball of anger and resentment because of the way my parents treated me. I told my husband about all of this a few months after we started dating, so he was aware of everything from the start. My husband told me he told himself he would be the best dad he could be, because he wanted our kids to have the childhood he knew I wanted, and wanted for them. Now, I started crying here and was a bit of a mess for a few minutes lol. It was honestly one of the most touching things anyone has ever said to me. I told him he is the best dad, and that I love him so much for it. Finding out that this was essentially the root of everything, it was a lot easier to continue on with the rest of my points. Everything has been great since. He really listened to what I was saying this time, and has made a big effort to help me out more while also cooling it a bit with the kids. Him and our daughter have been riding around on their bikes together every weekend. I've also started learning how to ride so I can eventually join. Again, I want to thank everyone for commenting on my OP and helping me gather my thoughts. I thought a few things said about my husband were a bit extreme, but I realize that's something that happens when people give advice on a situation they only have so much info on. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 36F, am a neurologist and I absolutely love my patients and my job. I believe there is no greater honor in life than being able to help others. The road to my medical degree was not easy, and it was paved with many rejections. I was a troubled teen in high school and I didn't get accepted into any colleges my senior year. I had to work my way up, starting with remedial classes at my local community college. When I finally got into medical school at 26, I was absolutely thrilled. I met my husband, 37M, in my third year of medical school. We have been married for 4 years now. My husband works in marketing, and I make 3 times his salary. From the beginning of our relationship, I was very upfront that I was unsure about having biological children. My dream was always to adopt from foster care, and my husband seemingly understood this. However, after his friend had a baby boy last year, he began to really press me on having children. I was initially very against this idea because I was just beginning my career. I wanted to wait a few more years before revisiting the topic of children. In August of last year, I found out I was unexpectedly pregnant due to a condom breaking during sex. I was initially considering an abortion, but after many heartfelt conversations with my husband, we decided to keep the baby, and he would quit his job and stay home until our daughter was old enough to start preschool. There were several factors that went into our decision to have him stay home with our daughter. I make significantly more money than him, so financially it just made more sense. I am in the first few years of my career as an attending physician. After 4 years of med school and a 4-year residency, I'm just starting to practice on my own, whereas my husband has been in his career for 15 years. I was very clear I had absolutely zero desire to stay home and be a housewife. I respect stay-at-home mothers, but my work is my life, and I would go crazy at home all day. This just isn't a lifestyle I want whatsoever. Finally, I am not comfortable putting my child in daycare until she is old enough to express herself verbally. As a victim of a molestation when I was young, I just do not trust people enough to leave my daughter in the hands of strangers when she would be unable to report abuse/neglect. Our daughter is 9 weeks old today, and I am preparing to return to my practice in a few weeks. This weekend, I left my husband alone with our daughter while I attended a medical conference out of state. The conference was amazing, but when I returned home, my husband began acting weird. Today, when our daughter was napping, I pressed him to tell me what was wrong. He absolutely broke down and said he doesn't think he can do this. He expressed how trapped, alone and overwhelmed he felt all weekend. He now wants me to extend my maternity leave and is talking about trying to get his job back. This made me freak out, and I asked, "Well, what will we do with our daughter now?" He responded by suggesting I leave my practice and work from home. I said absolutely not, and he suggested daycare. At this point I just lost my crap and screamed, "If I knew you were going to back out of your promise to take care of our daughter, I would have never had your child." I know I completely overreacted and I would never trade our daughter for anything. I love her so much. But I am so upset with my husband and I'm not sure how to move forward at this point. Update. It's been a few months since I made my original post. I'm not sure how to link it. Check my profile. I did not expect my post to get so much attention, and I was frankly overwhelmed by it. Thousands of comments, and hundreds of DMs, and I even found my post screenshotted and uploaded on Twitter. To everyone who sent me kind and supportive DMs, thank you very much. I appreciate it more than you know. To those who sent me nasty DMs, criticizing me as a mother, you are part of the reason why 40% of female doctors go part-time or leave medicine altogether within 6 years of completing their residencies. Women can want a career and a family, like men have had for hundreds of years. This does not make us evil monsters. To those who sent me DMs seeking medical advice, I am not comfortable giving medical advice over Reddit, and I sincerely hope that you find the care you need. To those questioning why I was not on birth control, I addressed this more in a separate comment, but hormonal birth control does not work for every woman. Even board-certified OBGYNs will testify to this. After trying my best with every birth control under the sun for nearly 10 years, I decided condoms and pull-out would be enough. Was this a stupid decision? Yes. But 40% of doctors are overweight, so we aren't always the best at taking care of our own health. Regardless, I have no regrets. I love my daughter and would not change a thing. Okay, now for the actual update. A few days after I made my original post, I realized how awful what I said to my husband was. No matter how upset I was, I never should have used our daughter as leverage in an argument. Even if I had to quit my job tomorrow and become a single mom, I would still do it for her because I love her more than anything and I would choose her every time. I still feel awful that I said this. It was truly a terrible thing to say. Another thing I dropped the ball on was not being more patient and accepting with my husband. For some context, my mother came from out of town to stay with us for the first 8 weeks after I gave birth. My husband did contribute greatly. I'd honestly say they both did 50% of the work with the baby for the first week or so while I recovered. After that we split the work between the three of us. So, for him to go from 2 people supporting him to being on his own for a whole weekend in a matter of about 10 days was obviously a huge shock, and I should have realized this. His complaints about feeling trapped, overwhelmed, and alone are the exact reasons why I have no desire to be a psalm. Yes, we had a deal, but I should have given him space to express his concerns openly without me flipping crap. I stayed at my sister's with our daughter for a few days after the fight to give my husband some space. He would come to visit her every day during this period, but we agreed not to talk yet. When I came home, I apologized to him for mishandling the situation. To my surprise, he actually apologized too. He told me that he never intended to back out of our agreement. He just became so overwhelmed that he was unsure he was capable of caring for our daughter properly. He apologized for giving up so fast and suggesting that I WFH. He told me that no matter what we decided to do, I should not leave my practice. At the end of his apologies, he said that he wanted to give being a stay-at-home dad another shot. We then had a very long conversation about how we would handle things from there. He told me that caring for our daughter was not the overwhelming part, it was trying to keep up with the cooking and cleaning that was difficult. So, we decided to hire a maid and buy one of those meal kit delivery services. He joined one of those new parent support groups to help reduce his isolation. 3 times a week, my sister-in-law has agreed to come over to babysit for a few hours so he can go to the gym or have some me time. I also told him that if at any point he feels like he can't be Assad anymore, to please tell me. I made it very clear that while I would be slightly disappointed, I would be much more disappointed knowing that he was burnt out and upset while caring for our daughter. Since this, we've also taken steps to strengthen our marriage, going on date nights once a week. I don't yet feel comfortable leaving our daughter with anyone besides family, so most of these date nights include long walks while pushing her in the stroller or Netflix and takeout on the couch. But hey, it's been working. Addressing the whole poking holes in the condom thing. No, I do not think this happened. I honestly did not even bother asking my husband this. I felt that an accusation of this magnitude would be detrimental to our marriage, especially when it was already in such a fragile state. My husband has agreed to get a vasectomy, so we don't have any more happy accidents. He is scheduled for later this year, and we are abstaining from PIV until then. This whole situation has made me realize I needed to go back to therapy, and I have been seeing my therapist for about 6 weeks now. My CSA hadn't impacted my life for about 8 years prior to this, but having my daughter and dealing with postpartum anxiety has stirred up some really dark thoughts. I know that I am being overprotective due to my trauma, and I want to work through this so that I can be a good mother and a good partner. A lot of people told me to leave my husband, and I'm sure a lot of people reading this may think that I'm making a mistake. I know that I am not. My husband had a weak moment and broke down, but he does not have a pattern of being unreliable, dishonest, or unsupportive. He supported me through my final 2 years of med school, and throughout my residency. Please try to remember that my post highlighted the worst moment in our relationship. It did not show the 8 wonderful years we have had together. The next one is an entitled People Story Background. We have been family friends with the Smiths for about 4 years now. We have kids at ages that mesh up perfectly, so it's always a good time when we get together. They're great people that we trust. They have a daughter we'll call Carol and we have one we'll call Laura, both 12 years old. Laura is a bit shy but the kind of girl who opens up and has a great time with a best friend, which Carol is. Laura is also very organized and clean. She knows where all her stuff is and it's exceptionally rare that she misplaces anything. The incident. A few weeks ago, we had Carol over to swim with Laura in our pool. Before they went in the pool, Carol and Laura were in Laura's room. At some point, Carol started looking in Laura's dresser, apparently just browsing. Laura was a little weirded out by this but didn't think too much of it. Carol at one point says, "Wow, these are nice Lululemon pants." Laura had gotten them about a week prior as a special going back to school/birthday gift, and they cost about $100. She was very excited about them. So they talked about them briefly, then Carol put them back. The girls then went out and swam for a while, then came back inside and changed. Carol left her bag in Laura's room while they hung out for another hour or so. When it was time to go, Carol went and got her bag from Laura's room. The next day, Laura was absolutely freaking out before school because she couldn't find her pants. She looked in every drawer, looked in her sister's drawers, looked through her dirty clothes, the laundry room, everywhere. The pants were nowhere to be found. We certainly didn't want to assume the worst of Carol, but somewhat related, Laura did mention that Carol was wearing a different friend's Crocs which she said she had borrowed from said friend. So my wife and I decided my wife would call Carol's mom and do the old benefit of the doubt conversation, asking gently if maybe Carol had mixed up Laura's pants with her stuff. Carol's mom said she asked Carol about it, but Carol said she didn't have the pants. So we went back to a theory of they were misplaced. But several weeks passed and we still didn't see them. Again, very unlike Laura for something like this to happen. The awkward. Yesterday at school, Laura sees Carol wearing what suspiciously looks like her Lululemon pants. She notices the logo on them on the lower back, the pocketless design that her pants had, the same color, etc. She's pretty sure they're hers, especially considering the implication in Carol's first reaction to them that she herself didn't have pants like that. She asked Carol about the pants, mentioning they looked a lot like hers. Carol seemed uncomfortable and it seemed like she was trying to hide the logo on them. At one point, Carol lagged behind the group of friends they were in and it seemed like she was trying to fold the top of the pants down so the logo was less visible. Laura had previously told another friend named Sarah about this incident, so Sarah was on close watch at this point too. Later in the day, Carol, Laura, and Sarah were in class together and Sarah observed that the logo had been cut out of the pants, which was definitely done since they had seen her hours earlier. Laura had a look and saw the same thing. My wife and I discussed it at length and decided that even if this creates an awkward wedge between our families, we will call again and mention what Laura witnessed. So my wife calls Carol's mom, who at the time was in the middle of a school-related event, so when my wife explained the situation, the response was, "Huh, okay, I will check later tonight and get back to you." It seemed a little more casual than she expected. Today at school, Carol seemed the same as usual, like nothing had happened. No mention of the pants, no mention of her mother talking to her about it, nothing. Laura, being the non-confrontational person she is, didn't say anything about it either. We have not heard from Carol's mother either and it has been over 24 hours. Now what? So now we're not totally sure what to do. Do we wait another day or two? Do we call a third time and up the rhetoric a bit? My wife hasn't used the word stolen yet, but that's only because we thought the hint, so to speak, was obvious enough that she would at least tell Carol, "You need to give those back." Do we just let it go at this point and cut our losses? We had already set up a date to have their family over this Friday for dinner, so now we're kind of dreading that, because if we don't say something between now and then and they don't say anything to us, we're gonna have that in the back of our minds the whole time and not be super thrilled about it. Not to mention, we can't trust Carol in our house because who knows what she has her eyes on next. What's the best thing to do here? Update. 3 days later. As I mentioned in my original post, we planned to have the Smiths over this past Friday night for dinner. This was just coincidental. The date was set up like a month in advance and a week or so prior to the pants disappearing. It was on a Tuesday that my wife called Carol's, the thief, mom to tell her my daughter Laura saw Carol wearing her pants at school. Side note, I thought she cut the logo off the waist portion of the pants to hide the evidence. Apparently it was cut off the calf as well, so it was plainly obvious that there was a ducking hole in the pants that you could see her leg through. So there's no way Laura made a mistake in seeing what she saw. Carol's mom made no mention of this all the way until Friday, when the family was over for dinner and she and my wife were alone chatting. The conversation went something like this. Carol's mom: "So the pants. I asked Carol about them again and she said she hasn't seen them. I went through her drawers and couldn't find them. I know when stuff gets lost at my house, it's usually in a sibling's drawer." My wife: "I get that. We checked every drawer in the house at this point. They're nowhere to be found." Carol's mom: "Did you check under the couch? We find all kinds of things there at our house." Yes, she really implied that the pants were under the ducking couch. My wife, somewhat bewildered: No, pretty sure they're not there." Carol's mom: "Huh, so weird that they're just gone." It was a bit more lengthy of a conversation than that, but that was the gist of it. So at this point, my wife is just trying to process real-time what's going on, which is harder to do than you might think, especially when the whole family is over and having fun and you don't want to make a scene. So she basically just dropped it at that point. My wife and I talked about this for a long time that night. In the interest of brevity, here are the conclusions we came to. Carol's mom is not taking this nearly as seriously as she should. Not just because we're out a $100 pair of pants, but because her daughter is clearly a thief and a liar and she doesn't want to acknowledge that. 2. Carol and her mom have insufficient respect for the property of others. 3. Carol is never invited to our house again. That means the Smiths can't come over all together again because Carol would be included. 4. The Smiths might not be in our lives anymore. We are still trying to feel this one out since their son is in our son's class and we love him and have had no issues with him. But it will be hard to have him over without this incident stewing in our minds, so we still need to give that some time. 5. For now at least, we're calling this case closed. I know some of you are effectively screaming at me, justice must be served. And you may be right. That might be the best thing to confront the issue again and get Carol's mom to cut us out of their lives or actually do something about this. But considering the amount of effort we, mostly my wife, have put into it thus far, and the amount of additional bad blood it could create to really dig into this, we just have no desire to take it any further. We talked it over at length with our daughter Laura as well. We told her that she doesn't have to cut Carol off as a friend, but she has to act under the assumption that Laura, Ednote, pretty sure meant Carol here, will steal from her, given the opportunity, and that mistrust is going to be a problem in maintaining the friendship. She was totally understanding and in agreement, but said she didn't want to cut Carol out of her life. She eats lunch with her in the same group of 4 to 5 friends basically every day at school, so it's not exactly an easy thing to do without a lot of drama. We also took Laura to Lululemon this weekend and bought her the same pants again. We told the clerk there about the situation and you should have seen the look on her face. Probably looked like what you're feeling as you read this, some mixture of disbelief and rage. It just really sucks to learn this about a friend, that they're like this and don't share what should be obvious values. My wife has vented this situation to 2 other moms and both were just absolutely appalled. She feels bad about essentially gossiping about the Smiths, but it has been dominating our thoughts all week, and having someone validate that we aren't the crazies was really good for my wife. So now we're sort of at peace with it and letting it go. So, Reddit, what say you? Did we make the right call? I appreciate the huge amount of input I got on my last post. I wish I could have responded to more of you, but the post was locked before I could, presumably due to popularity. The next one is an entitled People Story. I, 36F, have a long and complicated history with my father. To give some context, I wasn't even his first family. Before he married my mom, he was married to someone else and had 2 kids with her. He left them, married my mom, and had my sister and me. Then, when I was 6, he divorced my mom too. After the divorce, he stayed in my life, but I was more of a prop for him to show off that he was a family man rather than actually being a parent. It felt like he used my sister and me to attract his next wife, whom he married not long after. That woman was incredibly mentally abusive towards me. It got so bad that I stopped living with my dad part-time and only saw him occasionally. That marriage ended when I turned 18, and since then, my father has gotten married 3 more times. I eventually cut him off entirely because he's always been a self-centered, manipulative person who made my life miserable. I needed to distance myself for my own mental well-being. Recently, I was contacted by his current wife. Apparently, my father left her and her 5-year-old son, I'm not related to the child, to move to Thailand, where he's now living with another person. His wife has been pleading with me to get in touch with him and convince him to come back. She's clearly struggling and in a rough spot. I've already explained to her that this is what he does. He leaves families behind and moves on. I told her he's not worth her time, but there's an added complication. He brought her and her son over from China, and I think her citizenship might be tied to their marriage. This makes me feel even worse because she's in a vulnerable position and likely terrified about what could happen to her and her son. While I do sympathize with her situation, I just can't bring myself to get involved. My father has left multiple families in his wake, and I don't see how contacting him would make any difference. He's shown time and time again that he's not capable of being a decent person. I really don't want to open that door again or get dragged into his chaos. But, I do feel a bit guilty because his wife and her son are now facing the fallout from his actions. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to contact my father and staying out of this situation? Update. First, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my original post and offer their advice. It really helped me process the situation and solidify my decision. After a lot of thought, I decided to reach out to my father's current wife to provide more support in other ways. I reiterated to her what I know about my father's history with women and families. I made it clear that his pattern of behavior isn't new, and she's unfortunately not the first to go through this. I also suggested that she seek out any social assistance that may be available to her and her son, especially since they might be in a vulnerable situation due to their immigration status. Additionally, I advised her to contact a lawyer to get legal help with her citizenship situation and anything else that might arise from this mess. However, I made it clear that I will not be contacting my father. I explained that doing so would not help and would likely cause more harm than good for everyone involved, including myself. I know from experience that he isn't going to change his behavior, and trying to convince him to come back would only drag me back into the chaos I worked hard to distance myself from. I still feel awful about her situation and wish I could do more to help, but I've decided to stick to my boundaries and protect my own mental health. I hope she finds the support she needs to move forward. So, that's where things stand now. Thanks again for all the feedback. I'm still feeling conflicted, but I think this is the best course of action for everyone. The next one is an entitled people story. So, my mother and I don't have a great relationship. Throughout my life, she has pushed all kinds of fad diets, self-help trends, and even conversion therapy via the troubled teen industry on me. She has never apologized for any of it. Despite me telling her how much it all messed me up, I still haven't mustered the guts to go no contact because she's still married to my dad, who I do get along with and generally like. Recently, I moved to a new place in a really nice area because I landed a great new job. Suddenly, my mom really wants to visit and see me. I did my best to make excuses, but she pushed so hard that I eventually caved. One of the things I've been doing since moving into my new place is a lot of cooking because I finally have a nice, big kitchen all to myself. I love trying weird food and finding new ways to get protein in my diet without using meat. Lately, I've had a lot of fun making latiao. It's probably not weird to some people, but for my sheltered American self, it was funky, and I love the idea of it. So, I started making it from scratch and discovered I love it. Yesterday afternoon, my mom and dad arrived, settled in, and we started talking about dinner. As usual, Mom had to pick the place after looking at online menus for a couple of hours to make sure it fit her dietary requirements. She chose a vegan restaurant across town, but was so tired from the drive that she couldn't bear getting back in the car. So, Dad and I agreed to go pick it up while she rested. Driving across my new city took some time, which I told her ahead of time, and it was a little over an hour before we got home with the vegan/gluten-free food she wanted. She's not vegan, but she is adamantly gluten-free and has been for a few years now. As I opened the food in the kitchen, I noticed the Pyrex Snapware container of latiao that had been in my fridge was now empty and sitting in my sink. She even dumped out the sauce I had been soaking them in. I asked her if she'd eaten something from the fridge while we were gone, and she said yes, she'd eaten some chicken because she was feeling lightheaded from hunger, but it was terrible, and she was so ready for some real food. Now, this is where I might have been the a-hole. Instead of telling her what she had actually eaten, I just rolled my eyes and dished up the food. We ate, and she continued to complain about how bad and oily the chicken was and how relieved she was to finally eat something substantial. My dad kept trying to change the subject, but she kept coming back to it. I finally snapped when she brought it up again this morning when I picked them up from their hotel. I asked where they wanted to go for breakfast, and my mom joked about not wanting me to cook because she didn't want more oily chicken or something like that. I said, "Mom, that was homemade latiao, and I don't understand why you ate all of it if you hated it so much." She asked what latiao is, and I explained that it's just vital wheat gluten and water, steamed and soaked in sauce. I watched as her face dropped, and sure enough, within 30 minutes, her stomach was killing her, and she was having difficulty breathing and needed to go to the emergency room. The whole time we were there, she went on and on to the nurses and doctors about how I had fed her gluten and hadn't told her until it was too late for her to take her medicine, crying because the whole trip was now ruined. Mind you, this is the hospital where I work. My dad pulled me aside to say he was disappointed that I hadn't spoken up last night, that what I did not only hurt my mom's feelings but also put her health and safety at risk. He asked me to go home and think about my actions and give her some space. Now, I'm sitting here alone in my cool new place, feeling like a jerk and super anxious about what work will be like next week. I'm torn because I don't think it's my fault she ate my food without asking, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't omit the information because I was pissed and didn't want to discuss it further. I also didn't expect it to make her so sick. Update. Just got home. After everything went down this morning, I went back to the hospital to check on my parents. My mom was sleeping in the ED, so I got to talk to my dad and the doctor a bit. My dad still thought I should apologize. I told him I would when she woke up. When I spoke with the doctor, I asked if they had tested for the specific immunoglobulin present in celiac disease after gluten exposure. She said she hadn't needed to because my mom had already been tested in the past. The doctor then told me that my mom's lab results showed her TTG-EGO was low, which made it clear she does not have celiac disease. The doctor had even offered my mom a biopsy, which is the standard procedure to confirm celiac disease, but my mom declined. I later confirmed with my dad that it was because she didn't want to go through the expense and pain of surgery to confirm something she already knew. Furthermore, the nurse mentioned that my mom was given lorazepam, which my dad said was for her stomach pain and nausea. He even used air quotes. For those who don't know, lorazepam is a benzodiazepine, often used as an antipsychotic/anti-anxiety sedative, along with treating gastrointestinal symptoms. Apparently, the medicine my mom was talking about earlier was some kind of holistic or herbal thing. The cherry on top? The nurse was Chinese and loves Ladiao, so now I have a new work friend. I thanked the staff for all their help, and they indicated my mom was ready to be discharged. My dad wasn't inclined to wake her, but I explained that other people needed to be seen, and she couldn't stay in the bed indefinitely. I even asked the doctor to write my mom a prescription for more lorazepam, which she did, and that seemed to placate my dad. I wheeled my mom out to my car, and she was high as a kite, going on about how I'd poisoned her. She said that if I weren't her daughter, I'd be going to prison. I just apologized. No excuses. When we got to their hotel and my mom was waiting in the lobby while my dad grabbed their bags, I told him it was probably best if they just went home. I'm not going to lie. I got a little emotional. He agreed. So, yeah, based on the lab work and the behavior of the ED staff, I'm convinced my mom was faking it for sympathy and attention. Not that it matters because my dad will always support her no matter what. I'm never having them over again. The next one is an entitled people story. Me, F22, and my boyfriend, M26, have been together for around 4 years. He recently asked if he could get a personal loan under my name so he could buy a Halloween costume. I'm feeling unsure about how upset I should be, or if I even should be upset. To explain his current situation, he currently has around $5,000 worth of debt, does not have a job, and lives off government payments. When he originally asked, I got quite upset because, for the past year, his financial situation has only worsened. I currently pay for his groceries and essentials. Without my help, he wouldn't have basic items like toilet paper, soap, or food. Right now, he can only manage to pay his rent. When he asked me for the loan, it was for about $1,500, and he wanted me to open a personal loan because no financial lenders would give him more money. I don't know why, but that felt like my breaking point. I cried and told him he was childish for asking for money to buy something so frivolous. I haven't spoken to him for the last couple of days. He already relies on me to buy his groceries and is in so much debt from buying video games and action figures. I'm struggling to figure out what to say to him. He wants to borrow money for more of the same non-essential things that got him into debt in the first place. A custom-made Halloween costume seems outrageous given his current situation, but he doesn't see it as a big deal because, in his words, it's not a lot of money for you. I think I just need advice on what approach might help him understand. I've tried to explain the strain his dependence on me has caused, especially since we don't live together. I've even suggested loan consolidation or having a designated person manage his funds, but it doesn't seem to help. I'd appreciate advice on what steps I can take or what approach might work better in addressing this issue in our relationship. Update. I'm sure most of you thought this was a dumb question to begin with and really tore through me, but for those who were kinder with their advice, I really appreciated it, along with the private messages offering more gentle words. I know I must seem like an absolute idiot, but I think being with my boyfriend for so long, especially since high school, made me feel extremely attached. I wouldn't know what to do if he wasn't around, so in that way, I was definitely dependent on him. To clarify, the costume was a Spider-Man costume. No, I did not give him the money. I spoke to him, and he tried explaining that his cousin had forced him to ask for it, which I didn't believe. I ended the relationship after realizing, thanks to many of your comments, that I have extremely low standards when it comes to dating. I know now that I need to reconsider my standards moving forward. I guess the reason I indulged him for so long was because I felt pity for him and his situation. He lives off government disability payments due to autism, ADHD, and severe clinical depression. Over time, I became more of his carer after his family moved away, and since COVID, his carer had quit. He didn't have anyone to take him to appointments or help with his daily tasks. I understand now that it should never have been my responsibility, and blurring those lines led to me being both financially and emotionally used. Anyway, I've broken up with my boyfriend. I will try to listen to you all and find someone who is more on my level of stability and self-reliance. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for giving me the wake-up call I needed to get out before I committed to marrying or having children with him. The next one is an entitled people story. We're both 27 and have been dating for 10 months. My girlfriend, Lucy, is bisexual and has always been open with me about her kinks and fantasies, and bringing in other people, MMF, MMFF and so on, features high on her list. I'm pretty vanilla by comparison. I never guilt-tripped her or shamed her when she opened up to me about these, but I always made it clear to Lucy that they were a bit above what I could provide, and that in particular I would never be comfortable bringing another man into the equation. About 6 months into the relationship, Lucy suggested that we have an MFF threesome with another woman and that she would be happy to arrange it. I was a little apprehensive about this initially, as I didn't want it to be used against me as a bargaining chip further down the line, and so constantly checked in with Lucy asking if she was sure it was something she wanted and that we would be doing together. Not longer after the threesome took place, Lucy suggested that we visit a garden party together, which we did, and at which we only played with each other. She also suggested reaching out and meeting other couples involved in the scene. My understanding was that we would be befriending couples who were also dipping their toes in the water with garden parties and such, and have people who could accompany us to these kinds of events as friends. We matched with another couple on an app and met up with them a few times for drinks. Earlier tonight, Lucy called me and hit with me with a curveball. She said that the past few months she had been feeling unsatisfied and unenthused by our sex life. This really caught me off guard. I knew that Lucy was more adventurous, and I thought I had been doing a decent job of accommodating this. The MFF threesome, the sex party, and talking to another couple. I was hurt by this revelation, but I did my best to find out from Lucy what it was she felt was lacking and what we could do to fix things. After a bit of probing, it became apparent that she wanted us to experiment with MMFF non-monogamy, flirting with another couple, playing truth or dare type games with them, ideally some form of swapping, etc. All things that would make me uncomfortable and which I just can't ever see myself doing, and yet which are extremely important to Lucy. I asked Lucy if there was anything else at all we could try in order to meet in the middle. The subject of toys came up, but it was pretty apparent this was a mere sideshow. Lucy got a bit crappy with me at one point, insinuating I wasn't being open-minded enough, asking how I knew that I wouldn't be into what she was asking, that the situation is unfair and that I'm not willing to compromise, even though she is the one instigating all of this whilst being fully aware what my boundaries are. After a bit of back and forth, it eventually dawned on us both that we were staring at the end of the relationship. I told Lucy I was hurt by the revelation, but that I was still thankful that she spoke up, that she needs to do right by herself and not compromise on something if it's important to her. At this point, Lucy became tearful, asking if this was the end, that this wasn't how she expected the conversation to go, and so on. We ended up saying goodnight after promising we'd have another chat about it later. I'm writing this now having just gotten off the phone off her. I'm pretty gutted. Being told out of the blue that your partner has been unsatisfied and unexcited isn't a particularly great thing to hear. I think this is probably the end of Lucy and I, as I don't see myself ever entertaining the scenarios she wants us to partake in, and even if she agreed to bury it, there would be the risk of this coming up again at a later date. Since I started writing this, Lucy has been texting me pleading with me to compromise. I am trying my best to explain to her that the boundaries she is asking me to compromise on are hard ones and which would very likely lead to me getting hurt, but the topic of compromise keeps coming up. Not sure what to do. I would appreciate any advice on how to navigate this and if things might possibly be salvaged without major boundaries being crossed. Thanks. Update 1. A few weeks ago I posted in another sub about a situation with my GF, Lucy, nudging me to try forms of non-monogamy that I wasn't comfortable with, and claiming I needed to compromise when I pushed back. The consensus from comments on my post was that the relationship needed to end as her and I were clearly sexually incompatible, but deep down I was adamant that things could be salvaged somehow. Not long after our initial conversation, I explained to Lucy why her actions were wrong, pushing against my boundaries despite my repeated saying no, and she apologized to me. She suggested that we go away and write lists of activities that we would or wouldn't be comfortable engaging in, and seeing where we could find common ground or meet each other in the middle. It seemed reasonable. The other day, we sent each other our lists. Lucy was clearly disappointed with mine, as I more or less ruled out partaking in all of the ethnical non-monogamy, ENM, activities that she suggested. I made it clear that I was willing to partake in monogamous activities from her list that she enjoyed, for example toys, but that didn't seem to really cut it for her. It is what it is, she said on the phone, with a sigh, her tone of voice one of clear disappointment. I'm the one who's losing out here. You get to keep everything you want to do, but I don't really get anything. It's fine though, OK_dress 5215. It is what it is. I can just suppress my desires and keep them in my head. I really disliked her insinuation that I was being obtuse or selfish for not willing to compromise on my boundaries, and I asked why me being willing to try the monogamous activities she outlined didn't seem to count as meeting her in the middle. It's got to be spontaneous, and I want my partner to enjoy it too, which struck me as odd. I can't snap my fingers and suddenly change my enjoyment of or attitude towards a particular sexual activity. I explained to Lucy that she was the one who told me a few weeks ago, with pretty stinging words, that our sex life was unexciting and unsatisfying for her, and that even after our list comparison exercise, the options for fixing this were clearly pretty limited, despite me being willing to give certain, monogamous, things a try. I told her that I now have all these ominous thoughts such as, is my partner ever going to be sexually satisfied by me? Is she going to end up resenting or cheating on me? Swirling in my mind, and that some kind of reassurance that these fears were misplaced or that we could work through this would really help me. She immediately clapped back with, well, what about me? What about all the things I'm having to give up? That really got to me, and it reminded me of our previous conversation where she had basically showed no regard for my feelings with her constant nudging up against my boundaries. I felt myself getting angry and knew a shouting match would just make things worse, so I abruptly said goodnight and hung up on her. Before I went to bed, she sent a barrage of texts, explaining that she was upset by the situation, that she wanted me to feel more remorseful because of all the things she now has to suppress and keep in her imagination. She also expressed that she felt unappreciated for having to bury her sexual desires for the sake of the relationship. This sat really uncomfortably with me. Why on earth would someone need to feel remorseful for not wanting to risk their own mental well-being just so their partner can feel sexually satisfied? That I need to appreciate her for this horrible anxiety about the relationship I now feel. If Lucy and I were in a dead bedroom or I was completely closed off to trying new things, I would understand, but not wanting to take part in E&M? I had said to her before that I was sorry that she felt like she was losing out, but insinuating that upholding sexual boundaries is something I need to show remorse for is honestly pretty horrible. My head is all over the place. I, perhaps naively, hoped that things between her and I could be salvaged by comparing our respective lists and working with the overlap between the two. But if anything, it's just made it even more apparent that her and I are sexually incompatible, and frankly her way of handling the whole situation has really upset me. I feel like, as in my last post, she has no real regard for my feelings, and is just angling for the outcome she wants, this time with lousy attempts at guilt-tripping. I don't think I can ignore the writing on the wall this time. I care about Lucy a lot, but I hate how she keeps pushing and breaking me down like this, and her general lack of respect for my feelings and me as a person. Update 2. Lucy and I have broken up. I broke the news to her yesterday, first via text. I initially told her that we needed to talk on the phone, but she insisted that if it was to break up that I just tell her over text, and then confirming it on the phone. She was super tearful and keep insisting that this was all a giant misunderstanding, that she was sorry for how she had behaved and that she would never hurt me, that she is happy in our relationship. It was really hard hearing her so upset, but I stood my ground. To be honest, I felt like she was backpedaling on things she had said earlier and downplaying how important the E&M activities she wanted to try are. They are things that she had expressed interest in repeatedly very early on, and so can't be dismissed as passing fancies. I told her I appreciated her apologizing, but the damage was done. I can't be in a relationship with someone I'm clearly sexually incompatible with no real chance of fixing it. This was absolutely for the best, but it still hurts. Lucy and I are giving each other some space. We had an upcoming trip together and I have a few of her things at mine. So we will have to meet up eventually to sort a few things out and maybe clear the air. And so I'll need to be strong and make sure I don't cave in. Thank you r/offmachist for hearing me out and advising me. It means a lot. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.